Here with us now is Lotte, PhD candidate, Leiden University, the Netherlands. She will present her current research for her PhD project. Lotte researches art as a means to gain knowledge within scientific and technological discourse. Specifically, she focuses on subjective experiences of biotechnological art to enhance bioethical discourse. Lotte's research is titled BIOART for the Praxis of New Bioethics. Welcome, Lotte.
Well, thank you so much, Leanna, for this wonderful introduction and inviting me to the symposium with all these impressive speakers, great experts, and being the only female speaker amongst a lot of great men. So I'm delighted to talk about my research, which is on specific knowledge and insights generated by contemporary artworks that deal with the life sciences and biotechnology to enhance bioethical understanding. So the question that has keeping me awake for the past years, many years, and which is actually the incentive for my research that comes close to this symposium, Evolving Merchant Hands, is what the dance of art and science contributes to. So for my PhD research, I start off from the position that when it comes to art engaged with the bioscientific research and biomedical developments, it is not the task of art to assist technosciences with making research more approachable or understandable for non-experts. To be of any value, it cannot simply confirm already existing and acknowledged viewpoints. If the fusion of art and science should be a factor to society, it has to be work that exposes a new light or show a different perspective on the body, on the medical world, and on artistic experience. Because art should enable us to experience those aspects and subjectivities that are present but are not necessarily recognized or accounted for in the biomedical realm. So to show how this looks like, for today, I would like to talk about a specific biomedical practice to exemplify why art matters in our understanding of our own bodies and in health and their ethicultural frameworks. So to start off, I would like to draw your attention to this projected image. This is not an artwork. It's just a photograph of, well, as you probably can recognize, the behind of two rodents, namely laboratory rats, and their tails are held up by two human hands. And I would like to ask you to answer this question for yourself, so you don't have to email it or anything. But what do you think is the biological sex of these animals? So do you have an idea what sex you would assign to both of them or either one of them? And if you have an idea, then I would like to ask you, on what basis is this assessment? So are there any specific phenotypical traits that you assign or that you recognize, or is it maybe through comparison between the two, or a gut feeling that informs you about this? So why do you think that these rodents have specific sexes? Well, to skip ahead to the answer, this is an image from a document on a workshop on working with laboratory rats. And one of the points in this manual was how to identify the biological sex of the lab animal. And to skip ahead to the answer, can you go to the next slide? Yeah, exactly. As you can see, on the left one is deemed female and the right one is male. And I don't know if you had the same answer or if you and how you came to that answer yourself. Maybe you recognize pink holes or maybe the size of the bodies. But here, the sex is determined based on one phenotypical trait, which is the anogenital distance, and that is indicated by these black arrows here. Can we go to the next slide? So the anogenital distance is what I would like to talk about today, and that is actually the distance between a subject's midpoint of the anus to the start of their genitalia. In the image here, you can see it indicated by number 1. In some research papers, also those of number 2 and 3 are used, but number 1 is the most common one. And the anogenital distance is a common biomarker in animal studies. So it has been mostly used in research on rodents, but also on cows, for instance, and rather recently, also human medicine took it over as a parameter. And by recent, I'm talking about the past 10 to 15 years, so it's already been in practice for a while. And that is because of a twofold reason. First of all, what I said before, it is used for sex determination because male subjects typically have about twice the distance as female subjects, making it a sexual dimorphism. And secondly, It is also used as a bioassay, meaning that it is an index of exposure to environmental chemicals. Because a deviation of the normal bandwidth where a male has twice the distance as a female, any deviation from this signals a disturbance of normal development connected to a hormonal imbalance triggered by environmental chemicals. Because supposedly a subject's early or prenatal exposure to certain plastics, so when they were in the womb of their mother, exposure to phthalates, plastics in air or water, food or dust, disrupt the hormonal balance of both mother and child or fetus. And this plastic pollution is often the result of certain industrial practices or is present in the use of certain products with, well, potentially dangerous plastics. And the anogenital distance on the body is thus related to fetal hormonal action, which is important. And some research has shown that the disruption of this hormonal action is correlated with certain health risks, such as reproductive problems, or it has been used to check or to compare with sperm count or the development of testes. And the anogenital distance measurements can thus be used to determine these health risks. And the level or intensity of chemical exposure is tested by comparing the distances of different subjects to predetermined male and female bandwidths. Thus, the anogenital distance as a marker of proper or healthy development is uses specific quantified measures to see whether a subject's genitalia area appears normal or abnormal. So, just to recap what happens here, in the anogenital distance, a physiological trait is very practically used to make a statement about biological sex and about environmental factors that predict healthcare risks or health risks. Can we go to the next slide? Thank you. But as you might be aware of, issues of sex and industry and reproductivity, these are all complex fields that are not isolated from society at large, but actually there's a whole socio-cultural meaning of these matters is contained with this very practical medical use. So for instance, in a lot of research papers, uncriticized distinction between male and female exposes an ideological dichotomy in thinking. So thinking in terms of two and not accounting for other variants of sex, such as intersex animals. And biomedical research, even seemingly benign practices such as sex determination based on anogenital distance, this kind of research does not take place in a world next to society, but these worlds are actually part of the same kind of world where complex discourses exist simultaneously in exchanging different kind of knowledges and information and insights and values and norms that are realized by the actors within these fields. So the format of medical research can be inattentive to how the anogenital distance enacts actually the realities of those subjects that are classified. And our ethical thinking, so the frameworks that we use for decision-making processes and to define what is good and what is bad and what we should desire or not, this ethical thinking is shaped by how we understand issues like biological sex and how we measure it and how we frame it, how we talk about it, what we show and what we not show, and how we attach it to matters of health and treatment. So consciousness about the complexity of a practice or identification and categorization like the anogenital distance seems thus of importance. And then the question remains, how can we grasp and account for this sociocultural dimension in the anogenital distance as medical parameter? Well, there's different forms of engagement with this subject matter. Of course, you can theorize about it. You can use philosophy to think about it, to come to certain kind of insights of our human state. This is a rather relatively passive engagement with the subject matter. But you can also actively engage with it, for once by doing experiments. But the social and sociocultural and ethical exploration can also be research by a hands-on or body-on engagement, which is a bit more subjective. And this is where art comes in. Art is a form of active engagement method. where artistic research and the works that are produced by artistic research address actually subjective and qualitative dimensions by using issues like aesthetics or maybe irony or humor, play or different kind of emotions. These aspects, these qualitative sensations and intensities are addressed within the artistic field, which are not necessarily part of scientific research or scientific research methods. Maybe these factors are present there, but they are actively ignored or left out within the scientific method. Whereas in artistic research, this is not necessarily the case. The opposite, it actually addresses these issues. So to potentially show a certain awareness of prejudices or convictions or different kinds of norms of values that are present in the people conducting research or engaging with subject material. So all these aspects can be explored within the realm of art. And that is why I would like to talk about artistic research, and then specifically one type of art, which is called bioart. And can we go to the next slide? Yeah, thank you. So bioart is, as you can see, it is a means to research sociocultural implications of biotechnologies and to spark debate about how to balance life and technology in political ethical setting. So bioart is in general concerned with technologies that use biological materials to provide products and interventions for industry, agriculture, and healthcare, and then specifically healthcare and biomedical topics are addressed within bioart, because these, as was said before, most ethically charged. And well, some say that bioart should have a different name, for instance, genetic art, because it deals a lot with the genome and DNA, or maybe biological art, because it's also it's not only concerned with biotechnology, but also the life sciences in general. Well, in case for me, bioart is an art movement in which the sociocultural dimensions of biotechnologies and life science research is explored, with specific attention to biomedical research to enhance ethical discussions that benefit politics, policy, and society. So bioart is not only about exploring all these biotechnological features, but it is actually concerned with the relation between body and technology in general on a more meta level even, and to research the effect of biomedical developments on society, but also how we understand what it how we understand what it means to be alive, or to have a body, or how to engage with having a body on a molecular level, but also on a community level. And the cases with bioart is that it's often considered as a rather unconventional art form. Sometimes people find it aesthetically challenging. This is because there's actually a twofold way of making art about biotechnology. First of all, you have the representational tactic, where you represent biotechnology by using traditional materials, such as making an oil painting about genetic modification, or making clay sculptures about cells, which represents the biotechnology, but this implies always a certain indirectness about the topic. So secondly, you also have the presentational tactic, which is also called the vitalist tactic, in which the biological material or the biotechnology itself are used as the artwork. So it's not something that refers to something, but actually the ethical charged thing is used as the artwork itself. And because of this presentational or vitalist tactic, certain scholars value or give bioart certain values or assign to them. There are a couple of reasons for that. Maybe we can go to the next slide. Thanks. So first of all, because of this actual use of biotechnology in the artwork, it enables a certain kind of involvement for the spectator. Because if you would exhibit a bioartwork in your museum or institution, then the spectator or the visitor has to relate their own body to the living artwork that is standing in the same space as them. So they're actually facing the issue at hand, the bioethical issue, and that urges a certain immediate response from the spectator. So there's no safe distance. And because of that, it could potentially expose certain hidden emotions or subconscious values that the visitor has but was not aware of beforehand, because there is a direct effect. So there's no article or movie or something you can hide behind. You have directly interact with the artwork that is there in front of you. Another value that has been addressed to BIOART is, for instance, that it could demystify science. A lot of scientific research takes place behind closed doors, and not to say that it is hidden or it is secret, but it's often too complex or too specified for non-experts to fathom. And art, on the contrast, has some kind of public function or public position in society. And that way, it could shed light on scientific research. But this also makes it a little bit tricky because it can make art easily promotional material for scientific research, when then science remains a dominant factor here. Whereas I believe that art should also have an autonomous position when it deals with these kind of matters. Another value or a positive trait of BIOART is that what some people say that it has the ability to enable public empowerment, as art is not dealing with the same kind of institutions or monetary infrastructures as scientific research, or not all of them. It could address certain aspects that are not necessarily funded in scientific research. And next to that, it also could use the artistic research method instead of scientific method. And that way it can research being otherwise, or can be a bit more speculative in that regard. And in that way, certain implications could then come to the fore that are not necessarily seen or recognized in scientific research. And lastly, BIOART itself does not have to produce a commercial product, as a lot of biotechnologies, of course, are created because they are created to fix, for instance, a medical issue, a medical problem. Whereas in BIOART, it's not about the goal that has to be achieved, but about the method of achieving that goal itself. So the biotechnology itself can be researched and not necessarily what it leads to, which can make it a very interesting platform to research the ethics of this biotechnological development. Well, these are theoretically different discussions about BIOART, but that raises the question, how do actually artists deal with biotechnology and biomedicine? Well, I would like to give you one example for today. We have heard about many more in the lectures before here, but I would like to go to one artwork, and that actually deals with the anogenital distance that I have been discussing before. And the anogenital distance is not engaged with molecular technologies, but it shows how biomedical research is entrenched with sociocultural ideas about bodies. So can we go to the next slide? Thank you. So this is the artwork Genital Panic by the artist Maggic. And Genital Panic deals with the medical dimension of the anogenital distance, as well as its cultural character. And this is an artwork that started in 2018, and it's still a work in process, so it's still subject to change. But the project starts off with a collection of different kind of imagery about the anogenital distance. So think, for instance, of chemical pollution, of hormones, of measurements, and different kind of molecular structures that the artist combined in this collage, which you can see on the left. But at the center of this project is actually an active engagement aspect. Namely, the artist created a pop-up installation of a gynecologist's office where visitors could measure and scan their own anogenital distance. Can we go to the next slide? Yes, thank you. So visitors are invited to this installation. They are invited into this room themselves, and then to ask to strip down their own pants, and then sit down in this pink chair, which you can see with their legs up in these holders. Maybe you recognize it from their doctor's office. And then a black box, which you can see on the picture next to the plants. Maybe you can recognize it. Well, this black box scans then their genitalia area. So a scan appears of their crotch. Well, next to the scan, the visitors are asked to measure their own anogenital distance by using the calipers present in this room, and then enter that information in a database combined with information about their age and gender identity. And crucial about this part is that they have to do this themselves. So there's no expert here that does it for them, but they actively have to engage with their own body. And all that is with the aim to construct a so-called alien genital database, which is an open, anonymous, crowdsourced index with the objective, and here I quote from the website, which you maybe can see on the slide. And anyway, the objective to define the new normal, the new other, the new breeder. And what this means, or what this implies, is that it's actually a response to questions that arise when dealing with the anogenital distance. And these are questions like, who has the right to assign sex? Or who has the right to define gender? Or is reproductivity of intersex people accounted for in a dichotomy of male versus female? Or how should we understand disobedient bodies who do not meet the norms of a healthy anogenital distance? Or do we need binary frameworks to make things understandable and measurable? Or can we open up these frameworks to a multiplicity of sexes? Well, these are questions that can have very personal answers. And these questions are actually asked in this artwork in a very intimate way, because the visitors are asked or invited to the chair and expose their own bodies to this line of questioning. So Maggic, the artists, they push visitors to interact with the artwork and relate their own body to these frameworks of biological sex and place it vis-a-vis other bodies. So can we go to the next slide? Thank you. So here we can see an image of a repeated scan of the artist's anogenital distance. But yeah, in the artwork, Maggic combines a multitude of different aspects connected to the anogenital distance. So they address that it deals with hormones, with biological sex, with gender identity, with do-it-yourself science, with toxicity, with industry and health. All these different aspects are touched upon in the anogenital distance by the active engagements of the installation, but also with the stylistic visual imagery that are used in and around this installation. So the artist does not focus on one specific issue when it comes to this tiny bit of the human body, but they focus on a network of various components. And some might say that yes, this whole holistic approach towards the topic makes art messy or vague or has the danger of even becoming meaningless. But I would like to emphasize the importance of this kind of connective approach, as it addresses that all different kinds of aspects are at play in how we understand it. So this connectivity between it sometimes gets lost in processes of specialization, which is placed in the scientific discourse. Because, simply said, the anogenital distance is not one neutral bodily area with just one meaning as a simple biomarker. The artwork shows how differently we can understand this parameter. So on the one hand, you have the objective implication, for instance, where you see that this distance is too short, so there's something wrong, which is a rather narrow view, seemingly without any additional concerns than to address health risks. On the other hand, it also is a subjective and manifold experience of a being in a body with genitals, about which statements are made. And statements, if something is male or female or normal or abnormal, these are classifications that in fact involve social and ethical choices, which makes classifications actually a risky or even dangerous practice. Because the anogenital distance is not only a part of a body, it's also part of a whole society. And by making categorizations about it, you say which people and which social groups are normal and which ones are abnormal. And you say something about who is at default and who has to be corrected. So it is in the subjective experience by the spectator who drops down their pants and have to measure their own crotch in an artistic setting, which is a setting or a place in which you usually reflect on the topic. Through that, the anogenital distance shows to be connected to a whole history of sexuality and of gender identity. And it shows to be a matter of politics and industry and economics. So in the artwork, the larger significance of the anogenital distance as medical practice, as bodily area, as marker of ideas on sex and health is touched upon. So it exposes potential blind spots of the purely practical view. And not to say that in a practical and medical view is at fault or is doing something wrong, because of course it says very useful and very important things about chemical exposure and reproductivity. But the artwork instead underlines the qualitative dimensions by inviting people over to participate, to subject, to become doctor and patient at the same time, and then to relate this information to the data of others in a growing and even living database. And that way it makes the power and responsibility of classification and categorizations tangible to the spectator themselves. And that way, the subjective experience of the artwork introduces a reality that has consequences in ethical thinking, and thus it can affect the praxis of bioethical discourse, since people themselves give shape to discourse. And so, to recap in this talk, for these matters, by inviting people to actively participate, by consciously connecting a multiplicity of factors, and by addressing emotional, subjective, and maybe even irrational dimensions, as well as being an artwork, be a work in process, a database that continues to be opened up by a new normal and by continuously redefining the subject matter, a bio artwork like Genital Panic has something valuably different to offer to discussions of biomedicine and bioethics. And this is where my talk is concluded.
Thank you so much, Lotte. Thank you for your very thought-provoking presentation. We do have some questions from the audience. Firstly, do you think scientists are uncomfortable about being demystified by bioartists or by bioart? And does this potential threaten the authority of science?
I'm not sure if they, I cannot speak for scientists, of course, and every scientist has their own idea on what art means, but I do think that often artistic insights can be dismissed because they do not have the same kind of knowledge that certain scientists deem necessary to make any statements about the topic. Whereas I would like to address in my research that even though there's not enough specialized knowledge about a specific topic, there's also a whole different social cultural dimension around it, of which an artist actually does have something important to say. So they are talking in different languages about a very complex same topic, I would say. But threatens, I don't think it is. That was not the wording I would choose.
Okay, thank you. And can socio-cultural constraints impede the progress of bioartists?
Impede? What do you mean specifically by that?
To sort of make it difficult to continue or to prevent them from going in that direction.
So if artists make it difficult for certain kind of bioscientific research?
Can socio-cultural constraints make it difficult for the progress of bioartists?
Of bioartists, so not biomedical research. I'm not completely sure if I agree with that. I think, as I see it with artists, they, not all of them, or at least the artists that I find interesting, don't have a specific goal in mind or pursuit. So I think they like a challenge. They like when things are in friction. So there is some kind of antagonism between what is happening in scientific research and how community response to this. So this problem or this friction is of inspiration for bioartistic research. And this is an answer to the question.
Great. Well, thank you so much for your presentation today, and we hope you can stay with us for the rest of the afternoon. Thank you so much, Lotte.